Hey guys, today we're going to finish up the metal fabrication and finish up all the body panels on this Mustang. The quarters are on the car, the doors are on the car, we welded the tail section in the car. Only thing that's left to do in this video, I'm going to show you how to put the drip rails in and the roof panel. So let me show you a couple things real quick. We've got all the welds done and ground down. For the main support, you can see that we did the plug welds. But then I also went around and stitch welded it just to give it a little extra strength, and I did weld it from up underneath as well. And the reason I'm showing these welds here is you got to make sure that these are all ground down, because the roof panel is going to go on top of this and weld to this. So make these nice and smooth. Make sure you got no bumps or anything up in this section here, so we can go so it can be welded down. And then the roof drip rails we're going to put in. They mount to the frame here first, before the roof goes on the car. They get welded in, and then they wrap around and get welded from the outside here, and then they wrap around and get welded here. So I'm going to show you how those go, and we're going to start putting the roof in. The roof is here ready to go on the horses, and in preparation to put it on, what I did is went along and put all my holes in it. This is the back section here, so I got my holes that we're going to plug weld there, coming across here, and then we're going to plug weld all across the inside of where the window goes. I did not make any holes across here because this actually is going to get welded to the drip rail. I'm going to show you guys how we're going to do that. Make things easier, we'll probably come up from the bottom and weld from the bottom of the drip rail, because it'll be easier to grind than to try to grind in this area here. So there's our roof panel ready to go on. Car is ready to go, welded together. So before we do that, you can see everything is bare metal and welds. I'm going to put some weld through primer in this area here because we're going to weld through it. This here we're going to prime and paint to protect it. And I'll probably throw a little bit of paint on this section here and this section here. Just protect it, because we're never going to be able to get to that again. And then across here we'll put a little paint on here. We don't want to put the paint in our sections where we're going to weld it, but the top section, the back, we'll give that a little protection. And we'll probably flip this over and give it some protection in the same areas that are going to be hidden. All right, so now I just want to show real quick how we prepped the area. So we've got this in here. It's got the weld through primer. Where I had bare metal, I just hit it with the weld through primer. Everything else that's going to be covered by the sheet metal, I just hit that with some paint to protect it. Here's where the drip rail is going to be welded to. We left that bare, but you can see all this down in here. That's going to get covered and hard to get to. It's all protected. This will get a coat of weld through primer on it. And then we did the same thing across here. All this metal is usually bare from the factory, but we got that protected. We're going to do the same thing to the bottom side of the roof rail. We'll strip this down so it's bare. We'll put some weld through primer on that. Same here, this is the back section. But what I'm going to show you now is this is the drip rail, and this goes up onto the car, and it mounts up in here like this. So what I need to do is all across here, I need to put some holes in there so we can butt weld that as well. So I'm going to take this off, set the camera on a tripod so you can see how I'm prepping that. So this is the driver's side drip rail. It goes on the car. This is the part that welds to the top frame. These here wrap up underneath, and I'll show you that in just a second. All I'm going to do is take my hole punch and punch some holes across the top here real quick. So now I've got my holes kind of evenly spaced across here. We're going to put this up into the area where it needs to be. Let me show you how that goes. Now this was previously put on, and adjusted it a little bit when I put everything together for my test fit. Got to push this part up in here because it bends easily in shipping, and when it was shipped, this part didn't fit very well, so you kind of have to push it up into this pocket here before you drill your holes. So I pushed that up into that pocket just like you see I'm doing there. This part of the quarter panel was pushing it out a little bit, so I bent that back. When this all goes together and I'm done, I'll just metal finish this, hammer and dolly that together, because that's where we're going to weld that piece in. Just want this to sit flush up underneath in here. And then we're going to do our spot welding across here. We'll end up grinding that down. We'll give that a coat of paint to protect it, and then the roof panel will go on. We'll do the same thing on both sides. I'm basically going to weld this first. I'm not going to weld this section here because we may adjust that or move that just a little bit. I want to make sure that that's up nice and tight, but I want to have the roof panel on first. Actually, I forgot to put some holes in here for the welding. So I'm going to put a couple holes up in here, and I'll do the same thing on the back section, and I'll put it back on. Alright, so now we've got our plug weld holes on both sides, and we're going to mount it. We're going to tack weld or plug weld these up in here, and then we'll do that same thing to the other side. Alright, so there it is, welded on with the welds ground down. We'll throw some paint on that, protect that. Basically, the roof is going to come down and sit in this channel. We need to make some holes and clean the metals because this is where we're actually going to weld the sides of the roof on. This channel right here is where this is the roof. It's upside down, but this channel here is going to sit there, and then these two pieces here sits down in there and gets welded on. The inner lip here, I ground back all of the metal to bare metal, and I did the same thing for the roof panel that's going to fold over and weld to this. What I'm going to do is put some weld through primer down on this lip, and also on the edge of the roof I have this ground back to bare metal. I'm going to put a very light coat of weld through primer on it. Also on the roof, I ground back everything to bare metal on the edges where we're going to plug weld, and then also the edge where we're going to spot weld. And give everything a light coat of the weld through primer. That's just to protect the metal in between the two pieces. Alright, now it's time we're getting ready to put the roof panel on the car. This is the time to make sure everything is ground down, everything is welded, everything is protected and painted that you want to protect. Because once we set this in and start welding it, you can't take it back off. So all your edges where it's going to sit flush need to be nice and smooth with all the welds ground down. If you're going to put some protectant in between the two metals, a welding primer or something like that, let's put it on. Alright guys, so now we've got the roof welded on the sides, in the back, in the front, and we've got it tack welded across the front. We'll finish stitch welding this in a minute, but what I want to do is I want to turn my attention now to the drip rails. So earlier in the video we welded the drip rail to the frame on the inside and we laid the roof down on top. The top part or the bottom part of the roof and the top part of the drip rail are going to be welded together. Alright, so we cleaned that and we put some weld through primer in there. So one thing I wanted to point out, I wanted to give you guys a little tip here. So when you put that drip rail in, it sits in flat on the frame when you weld it in. The drip rail itself is kind of flat when you first put it on the car, right here, this part, the drip rail itself. So if you look at it now, you can see there's kind of a bend in there, and that bend matches the bend that's up in here. So this sat a little bit lower, and the roof, there was a huge gap right here on both sides. And if you just grab a pair of pliers and crimp that and weld it, what that does is that pulls the roof down and then kind of starts, it pulls it down and then goes in because it wants to come down to meet this. So you've got the contour of the roof here. You've got this, also this contour line right here. By doing that, it twists the roof to come down and meet to this drip rail. And then if you would look this way for a consistent gap between the drip rail, it would be thin here and then it would get pulled in, so you have a huge gap up in here and then it would get thin towards the back. So what I did is I put the roof on and then I tapped the drip rail here to go up so it will match the contour of the roof. So that, you know, I just want to pass that along. That's one way to avoid having a problem or a gap up in here where you got to put a bunch of filler to make it look like it belongs. So now the drip rail is nice and tight and snug with the metal. I've got one sheet metal screw right here going through the top to hold it down and hold it together. I did the same thing on both sides. So what I'm going to do, I don't want to drill and have to metal finish through the top. That's just too hard with the gap that we have up in here to try to work in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a small pilot hole through the bottom this way, and I'll do my welds right here on the bottom, and I'll be able to clean that up a lot easier from the bottom. And then we've got this part here, the front of the drip rail, and it moves. You can move it to where you want it. I'm going to make sure that the gap is consistent here. We'll clamp that in and then we're going to weld those in as well. The back section here, the contour is not perfect because, like I said, in shipping this will bend and move. So we're going to bend this up and make that snug and tight against the wall. and then I'll bend these pieces back and crimp those tight and weld those. We're also going to weld that from the inside, and we'll weld these from the inside. We'll also continue that tack welds with some small holes right in here to hold this piece of metal as it goes down. So that's the last thing we got to do to finish this up. So let's finish this up and go from there. Now I just want to show what I was doing in the video there. This piece here needs to sit flush, and this piece right here needs to sit flush, and it's rounded. It comes up and it's kind of rounded right here. So all I did is I put my vise here so I've got something to hammer against, and I've tapped it down and made it so it's a nice corner here. So when we put our filler and our seam sealer in here, the water's going to drip down and go into the seam sealer and down to what it's supposed to, and not intrude into where it's not supposed to go. Alright, so now the roof is on, and we've got it welded here, we got it welded across here, we got it welded across the back on the drip rail. There's a small opening right here. We'll put a little piece of metal in that, and that'll finish that, close that off. If we look across the top, you can see where we welded from the bottom. We don't have to worry too much about any holes or any problems with that, or trying to grind in there and fix that. All our work that we're going to have to do is going to be from the bottom. So I've got my inside track that I made my holes, and then the outside is actually tying into the quarter panel. Same thing on the top. It goes up underneath and welds to the frame, but I've got it here to the drip rail across the bottom. And then up the front was the same thing. I got my inner row of welds, and then I got an outer row of welds. So let's just take a look at that. And the drip rail is complete. We've got this tacked down up in here. So we'll weld that in, close that off, and then we're going to seam seal all of that. That's the last part of the conversion. is getting the roof on. So the roof is on the car, the drip rails are on the car.
Conversion is done, but the build will continue with bodywork, paint, and everything else that needs to be done to finish this car. There is a playlist in the description box with all of the 67 conversion videos, and as we complete videos, we will be adding them to that playlist. We also have a 65 Mustang in the shop, and work is being done to that, so stay tuned, like and subscribe so you don't miss out on those videos.